If you've heard of Bonnie and Clyde, you're familiar with the duo that has come to be associated with criminal activity. The most well-known criminal team in American history was made up of Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, whose names are still employed as abbreviations for illegal activity. What about the other criminal alliances, though? What about everyone else who has committed crimes with you? We'll discuss 10 vicious criminal alliances that aren't Bonnie and Clyde in this video. We'll explain how they got started, what they accomplished as a team, and why they were so successful. Although Bonnie and Clyde are regarded as legendary figures in American criminal history, they weren't the only criminal team. You need to be aware of 10 more cunning criminal alliances that we have. Number 10. Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine May Wood. The deadly couple. This is the moniker given to a lesbian couple, Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine May Wood, who were found guilty in 1986 of murdering 5 senior citizens at a Michigan nursing home. Prior to their arrest on suspicion of murder, the two nurses had a lengthy history of working together at the nursing facility. They initially chose their victims in an effort to spell out the word murder using their initials. But they gave up on that idea. Unfortunately, they were also quite interested in choking and smothering their captives as a kind of torture. Wood would serve as the watchman throughout these crimes while Graham was the one carrying out the brutal killings. Both Gwendolyn and Catherine did it with the hope of cementing their relationship indefinitely. However, when the couple split up in 1987, things took a different path. In 1988, the police were notified after Wood revealed a secret to an ex-spouse, and an inquiry got underway. Graham received a sentence of 5 counts while Wood was found guilty on 2 charges of murder. Number 9. Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown. Serial killers Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown killed 8 people in all, committed many robberies, 3 kidnappings, and engaged in 7 rapes. However, this crime wave was just temporary. In 1984, Coleman, then 28 years old, and Brown, then 21 years old, terrorized the Midwest for 3 months. Once they were apprehended and put on trial, they were both given death sentences. In 2002, Coleman was put to death. The disputed assertions that Brown had a low IQ and the nature of their master-slave relationship were the driving forces behind the 1991 decision to commute Brown's death sentence to life in prison. Alton had a long criminal history before meeting Deborah Brown, but that isn't what makes this case so unique. The fact that these two were so madly in love with one another that they began murdering people together is what makes it so unique. There is no denying that Deborah Brown and Alan Coleman were an evil team. Number 8. Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke. It's unbelievable to think that a punk rock performance was the catalyst for the romance between Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke. To the dismay of Richardson's parents, the two started dating. They didn't want their 12-year-old daughter to date a 23-year-old man, and for a good reason. Jasmine Richardson was then kept inside her room and denied access to Steinke. The couple's forced separation, however, did not last long, and on April 22, 2006, a murder took place. The pair killed Richardson's parents and her brother, who was 8, on that day in retaliation for Richardson's refusal to visit Steinke. Richardson was given a 10-year sentence at the time because she was still a kid, making her Canada's youngest multiple victim killer. In 2016, she was released. Steinke, however, received 3 life sentences for the killings. These two are on the list because they were involved in one of the region's most horrifying killings, according to local legend. Number 7. Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate. In the 1950s, a couple named Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate carried out a string of killings that would become known as one of the most heinous crimes done by teenagers. In Nebraska, one of the first murders occurred in January 1958. Upon returning home at this time, 14-year-old Fugate discovered her boyfriend, Charles Starkweather, had murdered her mother, stepfather, and infant half-sister while posing as James Dean. Starkweather, then 19, and Fugate, then 19, stayed in the home for a further 6 days, excluding all family members and guests. The girl's grandmother eventually had suspicions and called the police. The two fled as the police closed in, possibly against her better judgment, and went to a friend's house hundreds of miles away. Then a protracted murdering spree started. Another 7 individuals were dead by the time it was over and Starkweather was apprehended, including 2 teenagers and a husband and wife. In reality, it was thought that Fugate was her boyfriend's hostage rather than an active participant in these atrocities. She is an accomplice, though, according to several witnesses who claim to have witnessed her participating in some of the murders. Even movie makers were moved by the string of crimes they perpetrated, which also served as the inspiration for Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. Talk about a literal partnership in crime. Number 6. Ray and Faye Copeland. Ray and Faye Copeland were responsible for a total of 5 deaths in what has been called one of the most heinous crimes in history. The pair is actually praised for being one of the oldest married pairs to ever get a death sentence in history. The Missouri police received an anonymous report that there were human remains on the couple's farm, which led to the first suspicions that these two were killers. Ray apparently came up with a plan to hire homeless men as workers on his farm. Instead, Ray had them write bogus checks to buy cattle at nearby auctions, using them as pawns in his scheme. The men would then vanish, falling victims to Ray's .22 before they could be asked about the fraudulent checks. When the authorities looked into this, they discovered they had committed these offenses. However, they did not discover any human remains on the Copeland farm. It was actually a nearby farm where Ray had worked a little bit. The Copeland house did contain some unsettling evidence, though. Both of them were subsequently given death sentences, although they passed away from preventable causes. Number 5. Monique Olivier and Michelle Fourniret. The Virgin Hunters, also known as Monique Olivier and Michelle Fourniret, were a pair of serial murderers. If you enjoy reading about serial killers, you might be familiar with this pair. Before he met Monique Olivier, Fourniret had quite the life. 4 children were born to him during his 2 marriages, but they were both annulled when Fourniret was imprisoned twice for sexual offenses against children. He tried to find a pen partner while serving his second sentence. Monique Olivier, a nurse, enters. She waited for Fourniret when he was released early from prison in 1986. For good behavior, no less. And they started dating. At that point, the murdering spree started. The now married pair had committed a number of felonies. Between 1987 and 2001, there were numerous killings, harassments, and even kidnappings. They especially sought out virgins, who Olivier confirmed had been untouchable prior to Fourniret's rape and execution. These crimes made headlines and instilled a great deal of dread in the populace as a result. However, they were eventually apprehended because their final intended victim managed to flee. They were detained in 2003, and their conviction came about in 2008. Both were given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Alvin and Judith Nealay. The deaths of 2 persons are the fault of Alvin and Judith Nealay. The pair had committed a total of 2 killings before being apprehended by the authorities. Alvin eloped with the teenage Judith, leaving his wife and 3 kids behind. They started with a series of armed robberies in the South, and it wasn't until later that anyone was actually killed. At age 16, Judith fell pregnant with twins, but the couple continued on. They were both imprisoned after a botched robbery attempt, and they reunited in 1982 after their release. A 13-year-old girl was their first victim. She was tortured, raped, and then killed in a hotel in Alabama. They carried out other crimes after hitting their initial target, with a couple becoming their next victims. This, however, was unsuccessful since one of their victims lived and implicated the 2 of them. Judith Nealay was the youngest woman to ever receive the death penalty in American history after being found guilty of their crimes and being condemned to death. Her punishment was later changed to life in prison, where she currently resides. Alvin received a life sentence and passed away in custody in 2005. Number 3. Henry Lucas and Otis Toole. Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas were 2 of history's most infamous serial killers. They alleged to have perpetrated hundreds of killings as well as other offenses including rape and arson collectively. That number may reach 600 if the authorities were to believe Lucas. Their history of physical and sexual abuse as children had a significant impact on their relationship. They discovered a kindred spirit in each other as a result of this experience, starting their criminal and personal partnership. However, before they met, both men had a history of murder. In 1960, Lucas killed his mother and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. After being freed from a second jail sentence in 1975, Toole was thought to have already killed 4 people when he met him at a Florida charity kitchen. They teamed up soon after, traveling across 26 states while killing people and raping women during the remainder of the 1970s. Their relationship, however, ran into trouble when Lucas developed feelings for Toole's teenage niece Becky Powell. With Toole abandoned, Lucas fled with the one female he ever loved. Becky's life would sadly end very soon. She passed away at the age of 15, and no less at the hands of Lucas. Soon after, Lucas was taken into custody in Texas. Later, in 1984, Toole would be detained for setting a man on fire while he was still alive. After being taken into custody, the two men started admitting to numerous murders. They both received death sentences for this string of atrocities, but later, for various reasons, these sentences were converted to life in prison. After serving less than 20 years, both, Toole in 1996 and Lucas in 2001, passed away from natural causes. As a terrible footnote to Toole's tale, Toole admitted to murdering 6-year-old Adam Walsh in 1983. Both John Walsh and the police concur that Toole killed their son. They concluded Adam's case in 2008 and named Toole as the murderer. In addition, Toole's niece disclosed that he repeated his confession of having slain Adam on his deathbed. Number 2. Michelle Michaud and James DiVeggio. California was haunted in the late 1990s by two serial killers named Michelle Michaud and James DiVeggio. Together, they killed a college student in California after sexually assaulting him. However, the pair had previously done similar crimes. For years, they had been raping women. DiVeggio and his girlfriend Michelle admired Gerald and Charlene Gallego, another local serial killing couple. To commemorate their inspirations, they wished to leave their own imprint on the local neighborhoods in the Sacramento region. That's why they perpetrated a series of rapes and incest offenses before torturing and killing college student Vanessa Sampson, age 21. DiVeggio and Michaud were both detained and found guilty of the killing and torture. They received a death sentence in 2002, and the California Supreme Court upheld it. Number 1. Rosemary and Fred West. For more than 10 years, Rosemary and Fred West were the driving forces behind horrifying homicides and other crimes committed all over Britain. In fact, murdering her children from a previous marriage, Rosemary, Fred's wife, shocked and outraged the nation. Catherine, who was carrying another man's child at the time of their initial union, was Fred's first wife. She gave birth to a daughter in 1963, and in 1964, they also had a daughter of their own. His wife filed for divorce in 1969, alleging abuse, and her family didn't hear from her again until 1971. Later, Fred would admit to killing her. He is also suspected of killing the children's nanny in 1967. When Rose was 15, Fred first met her, initiating a relationship that would eventually lead to their marriage when Rose became 18 in 1972. The insane, vicious duo would torture, rape, and kill countless women over the course of the following 20 years. 12 victims were confirmed. 2 of the victims were his first wife and nanny, and he was held responsible for their deaths alone. Charges against both Fred and Rose were brought about by the other 10 murders. When found, they preyed on children as their victims. Fred committed himself in 1995 before going to trial, and Rosemary is currently in prison serving a life sentence. So, guys, that was it for this video. What did you think about our video? Let us know in the comments section below. If you are new to our channel, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell to get notified about our latest videos. Thanks for watching.